there was heated debate in Cuba about what path the Cuban construction of socialism would take, because Che Guevara, his feeling was that Cuba should not try to copy the model of socialism in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, but that they should forge kind of a new path. And one of the pamphlets he wrote justifying that was called "Socialism and Man in Cuba," and he laid out that he felt it was a mistake that had been made in Eastern Europe and work in a capitalist state where you're rewarded, and he said that a spirit of selflessness should be encouraged and a spirit of humanitarianism. Also, at the time the Soviet Union and China had their falling out, Cuba didn't take a side. Che Guevara was the international emissary, and Che Guevara went to China and met with Mao Zedong. He went to the Soviet Union, met with Khrushchev. He went to North Korea, met with Kim Il Sung. He met with revolutionaries all around the world, and Che Guevara's big thesis was that revolutionaries around the world must be united, and that they must continue to spread revolution. The concept that had been preached by some of the Soviet leaders, socialism in one country, that we should just keep socialism in one area and make it look really good, and that's the he was for a concept similar to the idea of a permanent revolution. So Che Guevara ended up leaving Cuba and going to the Congo, and eventually going to Bolivia, where he perished at the hands of the CIA. He had been attempting to lead a revolution in Bolivia, but the Bolivian Communist Party had not supported that revolution, again engaging in the idea of a popular front, that you have to align with liberal capitalists to eventually get to some kind of thing, whereas Che had been pushing for a revolution from below. Biggest things, especially following Che's death, was that all around the world they had this mass campaign to build up sugar production, and they wanted to be sugar production for the Soviet bloc and for the socialist countries. And so volunteers from around the world were going to cut sugarcane. And Fidel Castro made a point, even though he was the president of the country, 1 month out of the year he took off and spent it cutting sugarcane alongside his fellow Cubans. I know members of our party went down for 3 months in the summer of 1970 and cut sugarcane.
And the Ramos Brigade.
Right. And the Cuban government, unlike the government of the Soviet Union, established fraternal relations with multiple parties around the world, whereas the Communist Party of the Soviet Union had maintained relations only with the Communist Party USA, with the Cuban Communist Party had maintained relations with our party, Workers' World, with the Communist Party, with the Socialist Workers' Party, with all kinds of parties, trying to build kind of a united, socialist outlook. And Cuba continued constructing socialism and became kind of a symbol of world revolution. In Angola, when Angola was invaded, there was a revolutionary movement, the MPLA, that was and won power in Angola. And when it was invaded by the South African apartheid government, the people of the Cubans volunteered in big mass to go to Angola to drive out the invaders from apartheid South Africa, and they were victorious. In the 1980s, as the Soviet Union was beginning to back away from socialism entirely and introduce perestroika, which was the market reforms, privatizing sections of the economy, Cuba, their response to the setbacks around the world and the decline was to have what they called the rectification movement. And in Cuba, they have a law that no elected official can have currently living person, even not only elected official, can have a street named after them or have their picture displayed publicly. So since Che Guevara was dead, Che Guevara became the symbol of this rectification campaign. And all throughout Cuba, the school children began to pledge every morning in school. They didn't pledge, I pledge allegiance to the flag, but they pledged, I pledge to live like Che and to live selflessly for my fellow man. There was a war, a war declared on the bureaucracy, and when there were government officials that were making a whole lot more than regular workers, that was combated actively. There was a struggle to increase efficiency. And there was a struggle to make sure that ideology was in society and that people understood Marxism. For a long time, the Cuban trade unions had their leaders had been their elections they had was the Communist Party, which was a popular organization, would recommend the candidate, and it was often by default, that the Communist parties recommended union leaders would take office. But instead, they abolished that. The Communist Party no longer recommended trade union leaders, so trade union leaders all had to be chosen from below by the workers from the shop floor. It was a militant period, and they were increasing sugar production, and it was the rectification campaign. And as the Soviet Union and China were liberalizing their economy, Cuba was reaffirming its belief in socialism, with Marxism becoming a prominent thing. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, that was an extreme setback for Cuba, and they entered what they called the special period. Because their entire economy had been set up around providing sugar to the socialist bloc. And so when they formed the special period, they had to reorganize their economy. One thing that they utilized was tourism. Just like before the revolution, Cuba is a nice place to hang out on the beach. So they set up tourist sectors. They also, interestingly enough, they began developing, because of the U.S. embargo that was blocking certain medicines from getting in, they began developing their own and discovering their own medicines. They started, inventing and using sugar cane for all kinds of things. There are painkillers, there's, AIDS medications that have all been developed through, the use of sugar cane in Cuba's economy. And it was a period of setback, but they had to reorganize their economy to meet the needs. Now they weren't supplying sugar. There was no counter-revolution. But it's interesting because in the press, ever since 1991, Cuba's government has been about to fall, supposedly. It's really funny, and it's the same with the North Koreans as well. Every time, since 1991, they've been about to fall, about to fall, about to fall, about to fall. But they're not about to fall, and actually they have the highest life expectancy in Latin America belongs to Cubans, because they provide a health care system to all of their people free of charge. They
make house calls.
Right. Universal literacy.
Yeah, universal literacy. Their literacy is rated at 99.8, whereas literacy in the U.S. is only 99. So they actually have higher percentage of literacy than us, according to the CIA World Factbook. They, in terms of infant mortality rate, they're actually lower than the United States in terms of infant mortality. Again, according to the CIA World Factbook. And in addition, Cuba has been a supporter. I mean, they export more medical aid around the world than any other country can. There is democracy. And even the literacy campaign. That was one of the first things, was to give everyone, if the people are going to rule a society, they need to be able to read and they need to be able to be informed. And so even when the U.S. did its Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 to bring down the government, they didn't stop the literacy campaign. And if you go to Cuba, every block is set. There are people's militias there, and the country is ready to defend itself. And there are committees for the defense of the revolution, or CDRs, in every community, where the people are involved in decision making, up from the lowest level to the highest level. Cuba. And Fidel was right. History has absolved him, right? And he was correct. I mean, Cuba is one of the most strong examples of socialism being triumphant. I mean, the Cuban government has brought great things to the people of Cuba, and it's one of the greatest developments for Cuba has been Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, because now they can get oil from Venezuela, and they had an exchange program, and I don't remember the name, but it's named after a biblical character who was blind and then healed by Jesus. I don't know what the story is. Maybe someone can help me with that. But it was a program where they traded with Venezuela in exchange for oil from Venezuela. They sent opticians to, or ophthalmologists, I guess, to Venezuela to cure people of blindness. And they cured people of blindness by poverty, in a lot of ways, can cause blindness and it's easy to cure if you have access to medical care. People had never had access to medical care in Venezuela, so thousands and thousands of people were cured by the Cubans of their blindness. Cuba today is one of the the leading the shining forces of socialism.